All right, this is getting too crazy, and I don't feel safe. That's why I'm wearing two hats today, to make sure I'm thinking clearly and not being manipulated about this assassination. We've got the final segment left to watch, and we're going to do that right now. Prepare yourselves. Hold on to your butts, just like Samuel L. Jackson said. Chapter 12, The Lineup. All right, line them up. Who is it? Who is it?
Among
Who's
those
responsible?
who witnessed the sniper in the sniper's nest, Howard Brennan was the only one who thought he could identify the gunman. At least, that's what he stated initially. Within a few hours of the shooting, Brennan had become far less certain.
Upon arrival at the police station, Mr. Brennan said, "I don't know if I can do you any good or not, because I've seen the man that they have under arrest on television." And he said, "I just don't know whether I can identify him positively or not." Because he said that the man on television was a bit disheveled, and his shirt was open or something like that. And he said, "The man I saw in the book depository was not in that condition."
Brennan was then brought down to the basement of the police station to view a lineup of suspects.
They have the wrong guy.
Among them was Oswald.
Mr. Brennan looked very carefully, and he said, "I cannot positively say." I said, "Well, is there anyone there that looks like the man in the book depository?" He said, "Well, that second man from the left, who was Oswald, he looks like him." Then he repeated that the man he saw in the book depository was not disheveled.
So that's not ideal. While Brennan did pick Oswald from a lineup, that identification was far from certain. But if Brennan is to be believed, this uncertainty was not genuine, but merely an act intended to protect his family.
I believed at that time, and I still believe, the assassination was a communist activity. And I felt like there hadn't been more than one eyewitness. And if it got to be a known fact that I was an eyewitness, my family or I, either one, might not be safe.
Well, if you wouldn't have identified Oswald during the lineup, might he not have been released by the police?
No, I already knew they had the man for murder, and I knew he would not be released.
The murder of whom?
Of Officer J.D. Tippett.
What?
Well, what happened in between to change your mind that you later decided to come forth and tell the FBI that you could identify him?
After Oswald was killed,
was it a different
I was
person?
relieved quite a bit that as far as pressure on myself of somebody not wanting me to identify anybody, there was no longer that immediate danger.
Mr. Brennan, could you tell us now whether you can or cannot positively identify the man you saw in the 6th floor window as the same man that you saw in the police station?
I could at that time. I could, with all sincerity, identify him as being the same man.
All right.
So, according to Brennan, within a few hours of the assassination, he'd become concerned that it was the product of a communist conspiracy. He feared that should he attempt to identify the gunman, he could become a target and thereby endanger his family.
Did you and your wife discuss any aspect of the assassination and you being present more or less at the scene of the assassination?
By the way, let's remember height of Cold War at this time, literally the height of the Cold War. Early, mid-60s there, all the stuff that happened under the Kennedy administration. We got Cuban Missile Crisis, we got Bay of Pigs. That stuff's going to be on your mind. We start throwing around those terms. He's a communist or something like that. That really settles in. But you know what? In this video, they really have not talked about that much and linking a lot of that, or even making really a strong point, giving a motive, right? Because police like motives when it comes to murders. They need it. It's like, why would you actually do that?
Yes, we discussed it. We talked. I talked of moving her and my grandson, who was living with us at that time, and my daughter, moving them out of town somewhere in secrecy. My wife seemed to think that a person can't get away wherever they go.
So when Brennan was brought down to view a lineup later that evening, he feigned uncertainty to protect his family. At least, so he claimed. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether to believe or disbelieve Brennan's story.
Do I need a third hat?
On Sunday morning, November the 24th, Oswald was scheduled for transfer from the city to the county jail. Reporting from outside the police station, a local news correspondent couldn't help but to jinx the whole shebang.
Now, this is the armored truck that will carry Lee Harold Oswald from the basement here of Dallas Police Headquarters.
He's about to get
downtown
shot.
To the Dallas County Sheriff's Office and the Dallas County Jail. Strict security precautions have been exercised from the very beginning and have been even increased this morning as fear arises and grows stronger that someone may attempt to take the life of the man accused of murdering the President of the United States.
Hey, you'll see why we're about to get even more conspiratorial. And 3, 2, 1, boom. Jack Ruby.
He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot.
The doctors at Parkland Hospital said that
Tell him, Cronkite.
the single shot could scarcely have done more damage to a body than that shot did to Lee Harvey Oswald. It penetrated his spleen, his pancreas, the aorta, the kidney, and the liver. Oswald.
The magic bullet went boop, 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 in every organ. That's the real magic bullet here. But you can see why now this is going to become crazy, because it's like they haven't even interrogated this guy. Okay, not to the next level, like other than brief, like what do you call it? Not debriefing, but like when they bring you in and they just give you the first initial questioning. You know what I mean? No. So we can't get down to this plot very much, right? Who is involved? Why did he do it? Were there other people potentially involved? Is anyone hiding anything? This really was, like he said, the worst thing that could happen to this this whole investigation. Okay, this is the worst thing that could happen.
Expired at 1:07 p.m. He died at 1:07 p.m.
There goes
we
your
have arrested the man. The man
suspect
will be charged with murder.
Who is he?
The suspect's name is Jack Rubenstein, I believe.
Ruby.
He goes by the name of Jack Ruby.
Dallas
That's
nightclub
all I
owner.
have to say.
Because obviously what people are saying, a lot of people are going to be saying is, hey, he got caught and they got to kill the witnesses, get the story. Like somebody hired Oswald, right? And they don't want him to testify because they're getting exposed. And then you have like Jack Ruby. But the other thing is like, why, if you were like Jack Ruby, if it was going to be him that they feel could be exposed, why would you go out and do that, themselves? Now, I know what Ruby said, and I'm interested to hear if they cover that. We'll let them do that, of what Ruby says. Why did he kill Oswald? But it didn't really quell the conspirators very much, and the people that were, a little bit unsure about how to handle this. All right, last chapter. Oh, is he not talking about it? Okay. In case he doesn't, Jack Ruby's a nightclub owner, okay? And he said he killed Ruby so that Jackie Kennedy, okay, Kennedy's wife, wouldn't have to go and be interrogated by the defense or whatever and have to like live through the trauma. Okay, was it really like some noble act by this nightclub dude that they felt, that some people, said was involved in like mafia activities and stuff like that?
Video, we've encountered witnesses who not only contradicted each other, but also themselves. Central to many arguments of conspiracies that these contradictions represent attempts by the conspirators to conceal the truth. To give you an example, Charles Givens initially claimed to have seen Oswald on the first floor at 11:50. Then he denied ever saying that and claimed to have spoken with Oswald on the 6th floor at 11:55. Some authors have found this change a bit too convenient and suspected Givens was coerced to change his story by the conspirators. In support of that conclusion, we have this document in which Dallas Police Lieutenant Jack Revel said the following.
Lieutenant Revel stated that Givens had been previously handled by the Dallas Police Department on a marijuana charge, and he believes that Givens would change his story for money.
About 2 months
for
later,
a marijuana charge?
Givens did precisely that. He changed his story. But let's have a think about this. According to this interpretation of events, the conspirators had free rein to dictate Givens' testimony. They could have told him what to say or perhaps rewritten his testimony after the fact. You may recall that is precisely what Victoria Adams claimed and Carolyn Arnold implied earlier in the video, that someone had put words in their mouth by altering the written record. Okay, so wielding that near limitless power, what words did the conspirators choose to put in the mouth of Givens? Well, they supposedly invented a brief conversation about
none of it's that damning.
Lunch in elevators,
right?
Away from the sniper's nest, more than half an hour before the shooting. I guess I saw Oswald sitting in the sniper's nest, or even I saw Oswald carrying a large package heading for the sniper's nest, was a bit too on the nose. The same is of course true of every other witness in Dealey Plaza. Apart from the doubtful identification by Howard Brennan, no one can actually place Oswald in the sniper's nest at the time of the shooting.
So, and I think those testimonies, if you're looking for people outside, is going to be the least credible because of the chaotic nature of that moment and people not really sure what's going on or what was happening or where the shot was coming from and even how many shots and all that stuff. It'd be hard to use that testimony and have it be reliable. And it doesn't seem like it was because people were saying different things. So I don't know how you even make it admissible in court.
I really cannot stress this enough. It apparently did not occur to the conspirators to have at least one witness unambiguously identify Oswald as the assassin.
By the way, they didn't mention it. Ruby ends up dying quickly too before he can give full testimonies and stuff, like to get vetted. I mean, he got questioned and a little bit, but he didn't live very long either, and that made it even crazier. So, like, did someone kill the guy who killed the guy to cover up a conspiracy? I guess they're not going to show that part, but look into more about Jack Ruby. Look more into Jack Ruby for sure. Maybe I can find a video to
take a photograph.
Comment on.
For all this talk of witness coercion and evidence tampering, that seems like a bit of an oversight. What I'm trying to illustrate is that it's surprisingly trivial to pluck a stray document here, an unfounded allegation there, and sprinkle in some thoughts about means and motive, and you'll end up with a conspiracy theory that, at least on the surface, sounds convincing.
That's fair.
Whether it's organized crime, a foreign government, or domestic agency, there's enough material here to make a compelling case against countless groups and individuals.
When you got to make sure not all material is equal too. Some material is better than others, especially the forensic stuff like that, and then the hearsay of the fallibility of human testimony and just human cognizance when it comes to stuff like this.
Something upon which many authors, filmmakers, and others have capitalized to great success. I don't know if all of them are right or wrong. This video clearly doesn't cover enough ground for me to determine that. But to ascribe a conspiratorial motive to anything remotely suspicious seems irresponsibly black and white for a case so clouded by shades of gray. A person acting in a way that's unlawful, unethical, untruthful does not prove they colluded in a plot to assassinate the President of the United States.
We haven't even heard some of the other ones. Like, some people say that the FBI did it under, whether it's their own direction or something, or LBJ, the vice president, did it so he could become president because they didn't like the path that JFK was going down or something like that. There are so many. And again, because of what happened with Oswald dying and Ruby dying and all this other stuff going on, it left the door open to a lot of conjecture.
Such thrilling leaps of conspiracy make for entertaining stories, but that doesn't make them true. Remember Thomas Ollier? He was the journalist filming on the 6th floor during the initial search for the assassin. Decades later, Ollier began accusing officers of tampering with the evidence, staging photographs, and lying on their oath. The veracity of those allegations aside, the fascinating thing about Ollier is that he never believed Kennedy fell victim to a conspiracy. Ollier had a refreshingly nuanced take on the assassination by recognizing that evidence of corruption is not the same as evidence of conspiracy.
And I mean, and we saw when they were talking about the nest, the sniper's nest or whatever, how when the investigators came in, they didn't do a very good professional job. They were touching stuff and moving stuff around. It wasn't done very professionally, and that part's true. But yeah, like even the guy that was, accusing of them, saying, hey, that doesn't really lend itself to like a conspiracy though. It's just incompetence and just poor work done by the police.
Sloppy police work neither began nor ended with the Kennedy assassination, and people lie for all sorts of reasons. Loyalty, embarrassment,
usually
fear,
to protect
pride,
themselves.
attention, power, money. There's no shortage of motivations to choose from. Besides, what kind of clueless masterminds would allow a cameraman to casually film their supposed cover-up? Something I found myself doing a lot
really
while
confident.
making this video was attempting to view the assassination from the perspective of the alleged conspirators. You could, for instance, question the logic
He didn't
of
really
placing
do
an
that,
assassin in this specific window, a window in which he ran the risk of being caught red-handed by other workers inside the building.
Yeah, he definitely changed when he was saying he was going to go by the conspirators, because he really didn't do that at all. He didn't do that at all. He really did it from the police, the police perspective there, of looking at the events of that happening. He didn't really discuss any of the conspiracies.
A window in which could have easily been and
left it open.
actually was spotted by spectators in the approaching motorcade. A window from which his view was partially obstructed by a tree.
For a second. At that exact point, that's one thing I don't know, is the point of the shot. If it was at that angle, do they have the angle down good enough? Zapruder film's not going to show that. It'd have to be, I don't know, angle of the bullet or something like that. But it looked like, at least before the tree, there was plenty of visual, time for visual. For the
You can also question the logic of using a sniper to shoot at a moving target in the first place.
It's really
especially when
slow,
that
though.
person had a tendency to stand still in very exposed public places. If Oswald acted alone and the assassination was
Then
a
go to his
crime of
military
opportunity,
background.
these less than ideal choices start to make a lot more sense. He found himself at the right place at the right time, had mere days to prepare, and used the only building to which he had access. But for a group of conspirators to handicap their own assassination plot requires a bit more ingenuity to explain. He was a patsy, he was supposed to get caught, there were multiple assassins, you know the drill. But there's so much of that in this case. So much had to go just right for a conspiracy and the subsequent cover-up to succeed. From the roundabout process by which Oswald was hired at the Book Depository to the...
and I got to interject there. I mean, his background, Oswald's background, right? We talked about he had sympathized with communism. He was in the military, was court-martialed, I think twice. Eventually discharged. But yeah, I think it was probably the first video I talked to this. He kind of flailed back and forth on some of that time, spent time over there as well, and gets married and all that and comes back. But yeah, if you really want to take a more conspiratorial part, I think it's very easy to. And I have not gone down the rabbit hole of like JFK conspiracy stuff on YouTube, because I'm sure it's out there with how much I see of flat Earth and other stuff like that. Like, it's got to be out there, and probably very convincing, knowing that, because the door is so wide, is very wide open on this case. But yeah, you could make it, especially with his skill, Lemmino's skill, probably make a very convincing video if he really went into the conspiracies.
Selection of the motorcade route, from Oswald's narrow escape and subsequent arrest to him being given multiple chances to speak with the press. From the supposed tampering, suppression, and planting of evidence to dozens of expert witnesses being successfully fooled or coaxed to lie under oath. Not only would a plan as complex and prolonged as this one have been difficult to predict with countless points of failure, but it seems, and excuse my language here, a bit overkill. Yes, Kennedy was the president of the United States, but he was not exactly difficult to access. He was rather famous for abandoning his Secret Service detail and wandering off into crowds.
Yeah.
In fact, that's
uncovered. I mean, multiple presidents have been assassinated before. He's very up close and personal. And again, something like a motorcade, that's one of the most dangerous places you could look at. Franz Ferdinand or something, because it's impossible to protect if you're going to do an open air, convoy like that, especially over a decent distance.
precisely what he did
Secret
on
Service
multiple occasions during this very trip.
Now decided to shake hands with one or two more people, but this is the moment where the Secret Service has its point of tension. They say when the president stops moving, that's when we're concerned, because that is when the possibility of trouble comes to the forefront. This was one of those impromptu moments for which President Kennedy is so well known. So many times you have heard that the Secret Service men suddenly find themselves without the president, that suddenly he has left them and stepped into the crowd and decided to shake hands and give his personal greetings. You could say perhaps that this is more the norm now than the unexpected, because it has been done so many times.
I mean, he was quite popular. Let's remember some historical context here. A lot of times they say that 1960 election between Kennedy and Nixon was really like the first election pretty much completely covered by television media, and at a time now, by 1960, where there's a television in every house, right? So being charismatic and good in front of a screen and good in front of public was more relevant in 1960 than in any other time in American history, right? I mean, it's basically like that now. Like for any president to get elected, they've got to have at least some kind of charm of some kind, at least at some point. And they have to be, you know, fairly attractive and stuff like that. You've got to be an actor as well. Like literally, you got to be able to speak like that. And that was Kennedy. It's the reason why, again, he became popular. He was young. He was the youngest president ever elected. Right. The only thing that could beat that is Teddy Roosevelt, who inherited the presidency after the president's assassination. But yeah, so he was younger, more charismatic than anyone. And that, again, lent himself to his success, which also then led him to be more of a target for, say, an assassination.
As this news correspondent was alluding to just a few minutes before the actual shooting, all it takes is one person with a gun at point-blank range.
Sure. Well,
not unlike the shooting of Oswald.
Oswald wasn't.
Think about that the next time you watch a documentary or read one of the thousands of books implicating members of the Secret Service, FBI, CIA, Dallas Police Department, politicians, lawyers, doctors, investigators, witnesses, and so forth. Think about how all these alleged co-conspirators did not have to be a part of any of this. Just one person in a crowd whose guilt
didn't
is
require
assured the moment they pull the trigger.
That's a good point. This assassination didn't require a conspiracy. Didn't require one. A lot of them do, and you hear about that. A lot of them fail because of that, because they have so many moving parts. But the moving parts that would be necessary to conduct this assassination, there's so few of them, almost, none.
By roping in this ensemble cast of characters, it inadvertently makes the conspirators seem clueless.
So cool.
I like to imagine a conference room, and up against the wall stands a board upon which they've mapped out the whole thing. All the people they need to manipulate, all the evidence they have to fabricate, the entire patchwork of needless risk-taking laid out bare before them. And they looked at that, and then looked at each other and went, "Yep, that's a solid plan." But even then,
secret evil genius conspiracy man probably
didn't really think it through, or I don't know, made it up as they went along. That doesn't really jive with them not getting caught.
Yo, patrons!
That would have taken a lot of planning, skill, and ingenuity.
Damn.
So
all that support.
I guess you
awesome.
somehow have to convince yourself that they were clueless enough to wing the crime of the century, yet clever enough to get away with it. And therefore, there was no conspiracy. No, I don't believe any of these arguments make it impossible for others to be involved. They just make it a bit more difficult to keep that tinfoil hat firmly in place. I mean, if there was an argument with which to close the book on this case, I would not be the first to think of it nearly 6 decades and a continent removed from the events in question. I can guarantee you that much. Also, the word conspiracy doesn't even necessarily mean that there were other people involved in the planning and execution of the assassination. For instance, there's what some refer to as a benign conspiracy. This typically means that there was a cover-up, but it was not motivated by the concealment of complicity, as is so often assumed. Instead, Oswald did act alone, but there was some other motive behind the suppression of evidence. A common one being that federal agencies attempted to save face by concealing or downplaying the full extent of their failure to prevent the assassination. I mean, a known communist with ties to Russia, blindsiding the entire intelligence community by assassinating the commander-in-chief on a public street in broad daylight at the height of the Cold War.
He didn't even necessarily get into that as much as he could have, and it'd still be, largely debunkable, but we'll see. I don't know if this is going to really please the conspirators, though, or convince them, I mean.
Is not exactly resume material. Point point being that there are countless ways to interpret the evidence in a case as vast as this one. I am not exaggerating when I say that you could easily make dozens of these videos and still have plenty left to talk about. After all, the Texas school book depository is but one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Is he gonna do more?
Thanks for watching. Support me on Patreon if you want to. Okay, bye.
Is he gonna do more?
Just let me know.
All right, here we go. Final thoughts. Don't go anywhere. All right, does that mean we're getting a sequel to this? Because obviously that just alone, like, really, the video was called Inside the whole video, right? It was called Inside the Book Depository Building. That is such a fraction of the story, right? That's all that was talked about. We didn't hear anything about Oswald motivations, okay? Jack Ruby motivations, the Cold War context, the ties to Soviet stuff, Soviet influence, this assassination. You know what I mean? There's so many things. So if you wanted something to cover the whole assassination, other than just how Oswald got to the building, I guess, and shot, like, okay, but there's a lot bigger picture. And I really do hope that Lemmino does that and gives his obviously an incredible talent for independent documentaries to go hit that. Like, all right, let's go into Oswald now. You know what I mean? And like, look at his life. Cause I was, putting things here and there to hopefully spice it up a little bit. But there is a lot to talk about. I wonder if he'll do that. I mean, this video is done really well. I think another one would do well, but it depends if he wants to do that kind of thing. Cause I don't know how long this probably took him, but a long time. I don't know if he outsources the work either, but it would take a lot of work and you'd really have to commit it to the JFK thing rather than, he probably has interest in a whole bunch of other things too. So anyway, real talk here, taking off the conspiracy helmet. Nothing here really lends itself to a conspiracy. In fact, the best conspiracy arguments are not the ones that are included in this part of the story, right? And for this video. So, but with that, yeah, nothing in here. I mean, things still seem to corroborate the evidence that is at hand that it was Oswald. But of course, we don't know if there was other people, and as far as like that knew that he was going to do that or wanted him to do that or something like that. The Jack Ruby stuff makes it just even more compelling to possibly change the idea of a lone wolf kind of thing. But, regardless with that, and then even, with that information having already been analyzed in the Warren Commission, it still looked pretty convincing that, he did it and he was a lone wolf. Although I'll admit there's plenty, I'm sure I could learn more about it. I'm always open to learning anything new based on new evidence that I'm not aware of or newly found evidence. You know what I mean? It's how we're supposed to treat history anyways, right? It's like science, like everything's open to interpretation based on the acquiring of new evidence. So with that, I don't know, we can't stop, we don't want to stop wondering, but nevertheless, that seems to be where the evidence is most conveniently, at least right now, placed with Oswald being the perpetrator. So, all right, well, I haven't done this kind of thing where I've done multiple videos. I haven't done that, probably in years. And they're cool to do. They can be very cool to do, but it completely requires a commitment from viewers to actually want to watch that, because that's a lot of days of work for me, right, to go through all those and do those instead of plot or putting in new content. So if we find anything like this that you think would be good, you can let me know. Okay, you can let me know if you think it would be helpful for me to get in, helpful for the channel, right? Think about all the viewers that stop by. So with that, if you have come with me this whole way for all 4 parts, I really, really thank you. Thank you for doing that. And I hope to see you in further videos. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye.